and welcome to this discussion brought to you by GigRealm, an end-to-end digital solution that enables operators and independent venues within the hospitality sector to easily put on live music. My name's Andy Saunders. Today we'll be asking a panel of experts from across the live music and hospitality sectors their views on whether, with instability still a major issue across the hospitality sector, whether there's opportunities for venues such as pubs and bars to bounce back with an enhanced live music offering, helping to engage the next generation of customers. Joining me to try and answer this, and I'm sure a range of other questions, are Emma McClarkin, Chief Executive of the British Beer and Pub Association, which represents over 20,000 pubs and whose members are responsible for over 90% of the beer brewed in the UK. Mark David, CEO of Music Venue Trust, which represents over 900 UK grassroots music venues. Sam Denniston, founder of artist management company Verdigris Management, who represent artists including Jungle, Hot Chip and others. And Kate Nichols, CEO of UK Hospitality, which represents the broad hospitality sector. One of the first questions I want to ask is obviously about COVID and the effect that it's had on both the live music and the hospitality sectors. Is there an opportunity to put live music front and center in the hospitality sector with so much pent-up demand? I think I'm going to ask Kate this question first of all. What do you think, Kate?
Thank you for inviting me onto the panel today. And I think, yes, COVID has really devastated the hospitality sector broadly, and our music and late night entertainment venues have been particularly hardest hit because they've been closed for the longest. So there is clear pent-up demand. You can see quite a lot of appetite for nightclubs, music venues, going back to live events and entertainment more broadly. And I do think what you're also seeing is the difference now is that customers are coming out looking for a complete experience. And so there's an opportunity there to broaden the reach and attract more people into a live entertainment experience as part of a general hospitality offering, because people have got used to being able to eat and drink at home. Our biggest challenge and competitor is the sofa and the TV. And the takeaway that goes alongside it. And so coming out into a venue where they can socialize in person with family and friends, but also then that they've got the added value experience of live entertainment, music, etc., that they've been deprived of for so long and that you can't really experience in the same way at home. I do think there's an opportunity there for a broader range of hospitality venues to look at the opportunities that this presents.
We all have to find new ways to improve our offer and to connect with our customers. And there's been great disruption in the patterns, as Kate discussed, of how people used to go about their social life or even just about their work life. And so we have to find ways to reestablishment, to bring them back in, to resell what we do so well as the Great British Pub. And music is the top three things that people expect to see when they get to the pub. So we really need to focus on bringing them back by doing what we do best.
Sam, let's come to you. You're a manager that represents a broad range of artists, from artists presumably that can play arenas all the way down to grassroots music venues. What's your experience been during COVID? Presumably that's had a huge impact on your business and the business of your artists.
Yeah, absolutely. It was absolutely devastating for a lot of my artists. Some of my very, very big artists lost huge amounts of income, and some members of those bands, the only way that they actually make money is through touring. Not only are venues very oversaturated, but in my world, buses, backline equipment, staging, crew is all suddenly become very, very oversaturated again. So getting people back together, it does seem to be, and people have hiked up their prices post-COVID as well, because all the backline companies haven't been able to make any money and stuff like that. So artists generally are getting hit incredibly hard. But in terms of the demand, I'm just coming out of Jungle playing 4 nights at Brixton Academy, and they were all sold out. So that's 20,000 people. And we actually found that we had no drop off at all. So the venues were absolutely packed, and it was the most rowdy, fun crowds I've ever seen. It was a real sort of affirmation of life and why we all do this. So it does seem as if people are absolutely desperate to get back in a venue.
Just staying with you for a second, Sam, just to kind of start another cycle of questions. If the broader hospitality industry, the wider pub industry, were to broaden out into a live music offering, is that something that you think you and your artists would be interested in? I mean, presumably you're used to playing in what might be called traditional music venues.
I think it really depends on the infrastructure, whether there is the infrastructure within these venues to actually host the artist in a capacity that's suitable to their sound. But sure, as long as there was decent staging, and yeah, decent infrastructure, decent backline, that kind of stuff. And I think sometimes as well, you can slightly suffer in that music fans are used to going to certain places. So there would obviously be a sort of transitional period where they understood that maybe a venue that wasn't always a live music venue was now. But yeah, certainly if the sort of circumstances were right, then I would have no problem in booking an artist in a more non-traditional venue.
I certainly think members will have thought about it. I mean, we range from everything from a single site independent pub, bar, cafe, coffee shop, hotel, right the way through to national chains. It's clearly not going to be right for everybody, and it's not going to be right to put full concerts on. But there are opportunities that give a platform then to a wider range of grassroots music. And I think, post the licensing reform, where you did free up and deregulate some of the space for people to perform in, you have got a wider range of venues that can appeal to a range of artists, perhaps some of the non-traditional, not necessarily Sam's roster of highly successful artists, but those who are just starting out. Our grassroots venues and the wider range of hospitality venues do provide an opportunity and do provide a real space for young up-and-coming talent to hone their craft.
So Mark, as a former or current venue owner, I think, still a venue owner, and somebody that does this day in, day out, what are the challenges facing music venues to put on live music? You can't just show up, plug in and play, presumably. There are a number of issues that have to be addressed.
I mean, there are a certain number of artists that can do that, Andy. I mean, it's
you need licensing, presumably, don't you? Need some form
well,
of
as Kate's just said, actually, under the licensing reforms, in fact, under certain capacities and at certain times of day, you don't need any license. Actually, that's been done away with. However, that's not the same as you don't need to have the infrastructure, or you don't need to have the controls and measures in place that music venues have to have. So yes, you no longer need to have what we used to call the music license, but you will still get noise complaints. So I mentioned I want to try and be as positive as I can, because that'd be a nice change from all our usual COVID conversations. But I do think it's important to point out noise complaints are through the ceiling. That you wouldn't believe it. People are complaining about venues that have been there for 50, 60 years. They're highly likely to complain about noises coming from new venues. So that, and also the behavior of audiences. Our venues are very, very used to dealing with lively music crowds. They have certain structures in place. You've got the infrastructure issue. I can think of plenty of artists that have broken through in the last 10, 15 years that literally could turn up with an acoustic guitar and can make great use of these spaces. But you have to think about, what is this venue like? Where is it? What has it got in place? What sort of artists work here? And how am I programming this? What kind of people am I looking to get in? What role am I playing? I personally would love to see the opening of a lot more venues doing a lot more music, especially in rural locations. So I think it's important to do it right, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's not just that, okay, there's an opportunity here. It needs to be quite structured. It needs to be really thought about.
Tom Brady from GigRealm. We haven't spoken to you so far. We've been talking a little bit about infrastructure here. You are coming from a technology background. You're looking to apply technology to the live music world. How can technology help with this idea of connecting more hospitality venues to the live music sector?
Yeah, I echo what everybody said, really, and just picking up on Mark's point, and Kate certainly said it as well, around the infrastructure in general. There needs to be more infrastructure, and certainly research has shown that, both from a hospitality perspective, but also the music industry. And I think that's where technology does play a part, and having a platform similar to a platform that I run, which is GigRealm, but having infrastructure like that in place that allows artists, especially at the grassroots level, those trying to break in, hone their craft again, as Kate mentioned, to be able to actually break through, I think is critical for those people, because not many of those people at that stage understand how to navigate the industry. And that's before they even step into the hospitality world of going and knocking on doors of venues, etc. And I think that being able to tap into a platform that can bring all of that information together and simply say, this is exactly what an artist requires. This is what the venue requires to put it on, and make that quite seamless. The fact that music is one of the biggest things that's missed from going back to the pub, or just being at the pub. And I think that there has been a gap maybe within the industry for quite a while. So yeah, I think that there is a place for technology.
Would you agree with that, Emma? Technology, I mean, you represent, we've said it before, 20,000 pubs. I mean, presumably a lot of those pubs won't have put on live music before, won't have the expertise or knowledge of live music. Could technology help them in this area?
Well, the pandemic has absolutely disrupted things, as we've said before, consumers' patterns, the way that they enjoy coming to the pub, but it's also disrupted the way our business in a positive way in some ways, because digital transformation is happening now inside our venues at a faster speed than it was before. So them getting online with technology, understanding what it can bring to their business model, I think there's a greater awareness of that in the pub world, and certainly in the pub sector. And it's a moment of change. When a venue's been closed for a long time and they reopen, they have a chance to do things in a new way, invest in things in different areas perhaps, and looking at that offer, as I say. And I think that this is an opportunity to sort of therefore look at technology, what it can bring, and particularly in this field of live music. And I think that is something really exciting, and I hope that lots of people take a look at the offers out there and their live music offer as well, and see what they can do to improve it.
Mark, grassroots music venues have led the way in all sorts of areas. They're incredibly entrepreneurial, very innovative. Have they, in your experience, and I don't expect you to speak for every single one, but have they, in your experience, grasped the nettle of technology and utilized it as best as they could, do you think?
Shall I be really contentious, Andy?
Yeah.
I would.
That's why we're here, Mark.
Oh, jolly good. I knew you invite me for a reason. I would say that a lot of the things that have come towards the sector in terms of digital platforms have been solving a problem they don't really have. They do have a lot of problems. And frankly, they've been sidelined by digital. I mean, it hasn't hit the grassroots sector in the way that it's hit most of the rest of the industry. Certainly, if we look at recorded and publishing, it's a completely different industry than it was when I joined it. But actually, digital has hit the top end. We've seen these great, amazing digital shows. We're all waiting to see what these avatars look like. That sounds interesting. But has it made a great deal of difference to the small music venue in your little town community, or in your city centre? Not really. I mean, it's done, the most impact it's had is on ticketing. There are a number of platforms out there offering to do things like listings or bring things together. I don't think they've really got to grips yet with what are the challenges in the sector and how digital might help that. It's not that we necessarily lack audiences, it's that we're not getting the turnover from the audiences that we need to make it economically viable. We could see digital solving some of those problems.
So, Tom, Mark said that a lot of the time technology companies are asking questions or answering questions, providing answers to questions that haven't been asked. Was that fair, Mark? Is that kind of what you were saying, really? So first of all, what do you think of that? And secondly, what are the questions, in your opinion, that should be being asked that technology can provide answers to?
Yeah, so I can totally understand where Mark's point comes from. And I think that there's two parts of the industry. There's the traditional real grassroots, and I know that word's been bandied around a little bit on this call, but there's the traditional grassroots music venues who do a fantastic job of having great promoters, a decent roster of artists. They know how to put on live music. They've done it for years. And they probably don't need as much support from a technology point of view, because they've kind of got it sewn up. And that's the world that obviously Mark's more familiar with, and certainly Sam as well. And I think that really where technology plays a part is for the wider hospitality sector that Kate and Emma support. It's for those tens of thousands of pubs, but then also if we look at the work that Kate does in terms of her role and her organization, there's all of those great restaurants, cafes, hotels, all of those in the wider sort of venues that exist that want to put on live music, whether that is hotels for weddings, or whether that is a cafe running a nice little jazz sort of band there, or whether that is, again, a pub from a bigger operator. Because I think, especially when we talk about those bigger operators, those bigger chains, they don't tend to do live music on that sort of mass scale, even though research shows that that is the consumer demand. We've seen over a decade or so now of different changes in attitudes around being more experience-led within the hospitality sector and tapping into that. And the research that I think Emma was alluding to by mentioning it's one of the top 3, that again, I think live music even now is above live sports from that particular research that Long Live the Local did and produced. So it shows that actually, in terms of what people are missing and in terms of what attitudes there are with consumers, that shift is changing across the hospitality sector. And I think that there are a lot of people and organizations within that sector that absolutely are attuned to that. But again, it's that infrastructure, and that's where technology comes in. So I think in terms of the nitty-gritty part of it, you know, how does that then work? I think that actually providing a very simplistic online digital service for the different sites within let's say an operator within the hospitality sector, to be able to just say to their GMs, here's a platform, log on. It's very simple. You know, tick the sort of artists that you want, tell them what you can provide in terms of that equipment, that backline, that setup. And a lot of them will go, well, we might not have much or anything. And it's about being able to very simply cut through the noise.
You guys just following up on that, you guys in the grassroots music venue, you are experts. This is what you do every day, all day long. You put on bands, you know what you're doing. What about, as we've been talking about, the other bits of the hospitality sector that don't have relationship with agents? They don't have relationships with artists. They don't have those inbuilt knowledge of the sector. Would you say to them, well, you shouldn't be doing it because you're not experts? Or would you be saying, use the stuff that's available to you to do it? I mean, you said you want to see it expanding, other venues being used. I mean, surely there's got to be something that can help those guys that aren't as embedded in it as you are.
Yeah, I think there could be. I think there could be. I think it's interesting to see how that would work. And, you know, the level of confidence that you need to create is something that we really need to tackle head on. We can't just say, well, okay, now you can find out how many people this room holds and whether it's got an amp backline. Somebody somewhere, whether it's Sam or an agent or whoever the artist themselves, has to make a decision. That's where they're going to play.
What would you put you off playing at a venue, Sam? What would be something you would look at within a sort of venue's infrastructure that may make you think that it's not right for one of your artists?
But I think it would really depend on where the artist was at in their career. But let's talk about a grassroots venue, which would most probably be like an emerging artist that was coming up through. I guess quite often, well, in London, if it was outside of London, accessibility for people, so it's not too far, too difficult to travel, too off the beaten track. Because I think people do kind of look at a venue, and if it's absolutely miles away, that can put them off with an artist that they're not like 100% familiar with. And just really, again, sort of going back to, is the PA decent? Is there decent staging? Can you do bits with the lighting? Like, can you actually put on a show?
Kate, we've seen the impact of, and I'll ask this to Kate and Emma actually, we've seen the impact of Sky Sports and football on driving customers into pubs, and we've seen the support that, you know, that particular broadcasting organization and similar have given to pubs. Can you see music sort of having the same effect on footfall?
I think in the same way that our venues have had to work really hard to determine whether sport is right for them, and you've had that sort of differentiation and shakeout as we've gone through, the same process needs to be gone through with music. In the same way that we had support from BT and Sky and other sports broadcasters, there's been a great investment in helping those businesses that do feel it's right to put on sport. That's what the music industry could do for some of our independent venues, the occasional music providers that we're talking about, not the core grassroots venues that Mark's discussing, where you do have to have a more greater investment. But those occasional users who may value an opportunity to have a music night once a month, once a week, etc., the support of the industry to make that more accessible to them, to help them understand how they could make it profitable, how they could make it work, and what they could do to give a better all-round customer and talent experience would be really invaluable.
Not for everybody, Emma, and support from the industry. What would that support look like, would you think, if you were to, in your role, ask for it?
At the beginning of the Euros this summer, actually, we didn't see the increase in football that we were expecting, and that was because of the conditions and the restrictions that we were still operating under. You know, people felt it was a lot easier to meet at home and watch and move around the house because there was still restrictions to move around the pub. And obviously, gradually, as those restrictions fell away, the confidence in the environment that we had in hospitality came back, and then we saw the bounce that came off the back of that. So first of all, we need to have really confident environments where the consumers are coming back. We know as operators where we stand in terms of that, and we have, you know, some consistency in our trading. That's enormously important. Then you can invest in looking at new options, and then you can look at how you can enhance your offer, what distinguishes you from somebody else, another venue on the high street or in your town, and those are things that you can focus on. But you know, so we need to have a solid environment for us to operate in. But there are other things like the pub music makeover with PRS that they put together that allowed people that wanted to invest in their live music venues, that they had access to that. And I know that they're looking at running out a similar scheme later this year, which we wholeheartedly support at the BBPA, because we do see a need for us to understand from those people that have that expertise in music, what do we need to do to create the right environment in order to produce quality performances that will keep bringing people back again and again.
Mark, the National Lottery recently supported Music Venue Trust, gave you a bunch of money to put on shows, the Revive Live Tour. That's an example of an organisation supporting live music. Is it something the music industry could do as well, do you think?
You know, there's lots of people want to see live music. There's plenty of audiences to go around. We're kind of underserving them a little bit. And I think what we can definitely see as we come out of COVID is there is a huge enthusiasm. This is a very music-driven nation. People are generally pretty receptive to music. It's a key part, as Emma said, it's a key part of building an identity of a pub or a bar or a venue or whatever. I think it would be good to see support for that, particularly for where we're trying to develop new talent. You know, you mentioned the PRS one. I think actually more support as people try and launch their careers is the most intelligent investment I can think of that we should be using some of this money that's flying around for. And I'll be blunt, I wish more brands understood that. You know, that they love to sponsor the big headline event. They really need to be in at the ground level, creating the artists they can eventually get the Wembley Arena show out of. You know, there's not enough of that.
You work presumably with a lot of brands, Sam, with your artists. I know that's something that your company's involved with. What kind of language are they speaking? What are they saying to you about what they want?
Well, we do brand stuff in a very, what we do is very transactional. So they pay us a fee and then they either exploit the artist's music to an advert or the artist will do a specific show for them. I think it's a really brilliant point of actually supporting artists at a much lower level and encouraging them. And I think it's not just, a lot of my artists tour around the world, and you'd be amazed that pretty much every other country, the government actually invests in venues, invests in its culture, invests in its infrastructure. And as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, but the British government does absolutely nothing to support the arts at a base level. There are no grants for musicians. You know, when you go to France, a lot of the music venues are subsidized by the government, and artists love going and playing there because the PAs are great. And you know, third time I'll mention it, but like the infrastructure of the venue just works so well. And that's, yeah, you know, the French see supporting that side of culture and that side of art as something important. And ultimately artists pay a lot of tax back into the economy. And so, yeah, being able to create that and give back makes complete sense to me. But brands for us is, it's a very sort of transactional thing.
Understood. But this one to Kate and Mark and Emma about the CRF, the Cultural Recovery Fund. I mean, that was a groundbreaking moment, wasn't it?
So it was a really big pivotal moment where there was an investment going in from central government and a recognition that the arts and culture and heritage needed to be protected, but it didn't get down far enough. And you ended up having it spread too thinly.
When we now have 70 years of history of contemporary music in this country that we are astonishingly good at, that is one of our leading exports. It's certainly what we're known for around the world. And we still, as Sam has already said, we underfund it so massively compared to every other country in Europe and pretty much every country around the world, frankly. So put together, great to see so many venues getting public funding at last. Is that the new reality? Love if it was. I suspect it's going to be quite a fight to keep it that way.
What we need now is how can they help us keep our venues going so that we can keep hosting live music events there. And that's looking at our business model. How can they support us? Looking at business rates, looking at rent, looking at how we can keep these venues running as businesses, because ultimately that will end up helping them help themselves. So I hope that that's the next phase of this, that they continue to support us, but they also look at how they can help us as businesses stay afloat.
Okay, listen, we're coming towards the end of this now, and I just want to ask a very simple question. How optimistic are we for the future of live music in this country? We've been through a very difficult time in the last 18 months. We've seen brilliant work by Music Venue Trust, amazing work by the two organisations run by Kate and by Emma to keep these venues, to keep these members alive. We're at a point now where we can reset, reboot. Kate, how optimistic are you for the future of live music moving forward, particularly into regards with your members?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I think, the sense of optimism is tinted by some of the challenges that Mark was talking about earlier. The biggest thing that will impact on our sector and the confidence about and the optimism about the future of live music is confidence. Consumer confidence, business confidence, artist confidence, and that is going to be impacted by some big government decisions that might be coming out. So, the appetite, the demand that we've seen, the positive response that we've seen from consumers and from venues and from artists over the summer could be knocked off track by vaccine passports, could be knocked off track by what happens in the autumn. The 18 months of the COVID crisis are going to be nothing compared to the 18 months of the recovery. And it's going to take that long before we can really say with any certainty that the sector has come through the worst. So while I'm cautiously optimistic that there is demand, that live music remains vibrant, remains a dynamic force in the UK economy and is critical to sort of future recovery, I just have that sort of element of concern around issues that could knock it off track and could still deal a really severe blow to our venues and the artists who depend on them for performing.
I don't have much to add to that. Probably my range of optimism is even broader than Kate's. I having seen the bounce back of live music, I think the underlying message is there should be huge optimism, frankly, about the ability of live music to survive this crisis. What we have to be incredibly cautious about at the other end of the scale is, as Kate just said, the practical ways that we will need to recover and how long that might take. And certainly we need a lot more certainty that would build customer confidence. We could do with a lot clearer messaging that is more related to what venues are actually doing to be safe, how things are actually working, what our outcomes are. There's too many cliches and three-word phrases being thrown around and not enough really solidly built policies about how we're going to reinstigate the British public's love for live music and make sure it's sustainable. We really do need some solid plans now. We need to move away from the era of just, frankly, policy on a hoof, which just isn't working. It's not helping at all. It's destroying customer confidence at the moment. So I would say I'm way more optimistic about live music than Kate, but even more pessimistic, if there is such a thing, about the consumer confidence. I think consumer confidence, Kate is right, that is absolutely key. And I think we are in quite a difficult place with that right now.
There's definitely going to be turbulence ahead. We are not plain sailing or smooth flying at all. And there are many venues that are still really fighting for survival. I think that can be forgotten. You know, people, we talk about we're on the road to recovery, but actually some venues still don't know if they'll survive the end of this year and through that autumn and winter that's coming down the road. But what I hope that we can take away from this summer, which has been a very positive summer in many ways, and particularly for live music, is that deep passion that we have for it. And what we need now is stability. We need support throughout this turbulent time for the rest of the sort of next 18 months, as Kate says, for the pandemic to still be rolling around. And then we need to get into this period of sustainable growth where we know that we can stay open. We know that we've got the ability to pay the bills, and we can keep investing in the future. It's that confidence to invest, that's absolutely key.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic with the public. I think that, as from what I've witnessed with my artists, the public are really, really up for being back in live music venues. You know, as I say, we just had 20,000 people through the doors of Brixton Academy over 4 nights. People were crammed in, it was sweaty, it was absolutely brilliant. It really felt, yeah, just so vibrant. Where I worry is our government. I just think that they're utterly useless. I think they flip-flop. I think they've done, you know, what we've been discussing. They do nothing. For the Culture Recovery Fund was great, but it was sort of a drop in the ocean compared with what needs to be done. Does that, and venues exist because artists exist as well. So let's not forget, you know, the people that provide the art that goes within there, and there's very little support for them. And I think for artists and for venues, it's impossible to keep up. Everything's chucked at us the last minute. There's been no support, and it's just completely overlooked, considering that what we do contribute something like 4.46 billion to the economy. And yeah, I think the arts and music in particular needs to be taken far more seriously and respected by the British government in this country.
Tom, I'm going to give the final word to you. Would you finish on a note of optimism here?
Yeah, I think that actually I am optimistic about this sort of whole consumer confidence and getting sort of back out there in terms of whether that's people going and watching live music or artists wanting to perform. I think there's an entire generation that has missed out because of COVID and not been able to go to see live music, the 18, 19-year-olds that sort of coming through that period of time. So I think that actually, yeah, from what I've seen as well, going to gigs again and going into pubs, etc., I think that there is a lot of demand for it. So I think that the next 12 months will certainly be telling, as Emma said, that we're not quite there yet, but I am optimistic for it.
Amazing. Listen, I know you're all very, very busy people. We hugely appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. I think that's been an incredibly interesting conversation that we could have carried on for a lot longer. But thank you. Really appreciate your time.